So thank you everyone for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about the 7 steps to selling a home successfully here in the Bay Area. And I'm Wilson. I am a real estate agent, and I've been obviously in the field for 9 years, and I'm here with some of my team members who are here and would love to make sure that I have them introduce themselves. So maybe Jenny, you can go first.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenny. I'm excited to share a little more about some unique strategies we have here on selling, and have been on a team for multiple years, and I'll pass it on to Ashley.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi everyone, Ashley Thornton here. I've been on the team a little over 2 years now, and I for the most part represent buyers, so I can give a lot of insight on to what our clients are looking for to help as far as the selling process as well. I'm on my way to a showing right now, but look forward to sharing more with you guys, and I'll pass it off to Elizabeth.
Hi everyone, Elizabeth here. I'm the marketing coordinator, just tuning in to learn about the 7 steps to selling from Wilson, and excited for the presentation.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for joining us. And for those that are going to be watching this as a recording, we're going to be fielding questions, of course, live and through the chat. So we're going to be answering some that come through. And if you do have any questions after the presentation or during, please write them down and feel free to make sure that you reach out to us for any specifics. So I very likely will have Ashley and Jenny for you to if Ashley, you're still going to be here, for you to chime in on any specifics that you're seeing in terms of trends from buyers and regarding a search, and also any other trends that you see in terms of when you go tour properties that are occupied or that are vacant, and some of the stories that you've heard. So, but let's get started. Just restating, if you do have any questions, feel free to type in the chat box, and then we'll make sure we answer them when relevant, or we're also going to have a Q&A at the end. So the 7 steps, we didn't want to hide anything. It's pretty straightforward. We have all the 7 steps highlighted on the first page of the presentation. First is finding a local expert, and of course making sure you interview potential agents who would know the local area and have had success in the area that you potentially are thinking about selling in. The reason why that's important, it's not so much a track record, that's all looking in the past, but more so it's going to be the relationships that have been developed with the agent and the agency, whether it be vendors or other professionals in the field that would help facilitate any potential sale showings and things that would successfully aid in selling for the highest price, and hopefully in the time frame that you would be looking at. The second is completing home improvements. So we do get a lot of requests whether we have to make any improvements or if we could sell as is. If there is an opportunity to improve a home, there's typically going to be benefit in doing so in terms of the net that you will get. There's going to be some unique strategies that we'll be sharing with you in terms of how we could potentially improve the home, whether it's occupied or not. And maybe it won't cost you anything up front for us to be able to assist you with that. And we can share some live examples for that too. Number 3 is going to be making sure that we price the home competitively. We're going to be talking about transparent pricing versus recent history growth of 9 years of pricing, aggressively as in below market value, and pros and cons of each. Number 4, we're going to be talking about the housing preparation, so staging a home to sell. We're going to give you some live examples and why it makes sense for us to potentially, ultimately it's an emotional decision that a buyer is going to be making on a purchase. So if we can design the home and present it in the best light for them to visually and, for them to see how they would potentially live in the home, that's probably going to be to our advantage as sellers. Number 5, marketing listings effectively. Of course, the environment has changed, and I'm sure everyone has different questions about how COVID and how shelter in place and county regulations and state regulations, and especially right now in a unique time where there's potentially, smoke and fires, it's become part of our seasonality. We'll definitely talk more about how we can market a property even in unique times with limitations. What are we doing that's working? And we will definitely share that with you. And number 6, negotiations. We're gonna deep dive into exactly what we do to make sure that we can get the highest price. As much as someone's going to write a really nice offer and maybe a novice agent would encourage you to accept it, there's going to be other things that we could do to make sure that we have the best as much as it looks great already. And then last, number 7 is the escrow and closing process, what we call the client care process, where we want to make sure, depending on what is on the contract that is accepted from the buyer, that they follow to as much as possible the dates and the terms that they have provided for us. Because the last thing we want is scheduling for moving companies, the moving company to come through, making sure that we're going to secure our next place, whether you're leasing or whether you're purchasing another home and you need the funds for this to close. The last thing we want is a surprise where we have a hiccup and it throws all of our plans that we had originally had other vendors involved with out the door and costing us additional time and money. So we go through a quite extensive high touch close/escrow process to make sure that our consumers and clients have a very good experience once they do make that decision to accept an offer. So those are the 7 steps to selling your home successfully. There's obviously a lot of nuances that will go in between and per each step. So if you do have any questions that are obviously not personal and appropriate for you to ask here, more than welcome to answer them for you. A little bit about number 1, finding a local expert, and about our team. I think it's one of the most important things is finding the right partner, I would say, business partner to help you with the process. Just like finding an attorney, finding a dentist, finding a doctor for any sort of procedure, finding even a spouse or a business partner, I think the success or the failure that you will experience will in large part be determined by the person that you end up working with. And in that, I believe that one of the most important things you should look for is a person's track record and success rate. So if they can show you in transparency exactly how many homes they've sold, what they've done in the neighborhood, live examples of actives of houses that are in preparation, past sales of what's happened and the results that they've gotten, I think that's going to be extremely important for you to make a decision. It's just like going for a procedure, whether it's surgery or something else. You don't want to work with someone that, if you could imagine, an average agent does 10 transactions or less in a year and is a solo operation, where in reality, if you're going in for some sort of procedure, you probably want to work with a doctor that has done a lot of the same procedure, because they know the nuances that work, the hurdles that they might need to overcome, or you guys might need to overcome, and some of the things that maybe that are very niche to the time of the market, such as selling during COVID or shelter in place, such as selling when it's a bit foggier, or selling when there's smoke in the air and people might be turned away because of obviously what's going on externally. So partnering up with an agent that has a track record of success and also has the resources to be able to make sure that whether it's hiring a vendor for a cleaner or a competent inspector or contractors, which is a big headache for a lot of people, managing that process and making sure the work is done to what is agreed upon on the quote is going to be important. And that's where potentially a team like ours would be able to come in, where we have active projects from the scope of, hey, it's a really nice property already, and all we need to do is stage, clean, and provide the right marketing and also negotiate, to we might be working with an as-is sale where it's a bit of more of a fixer, needs tender love and care. And we have to pour some of our resources because we do know fixing and changing some cosmetic things around the house would benefit it. So it's always going to come down to a property and client basis of exactly the scope of work and also your goals, whether you do have a budget to improve a home for the purpose of sale. And we would always make sure we advise, of course, if we do spend money, that you're going to get a return for it. Because it doesn't make sense if we spend $1 and we get 50 cents back. That's, that would be the last thing we would want, where you're spending money, but the investment is not obviously giving you a return. So finding the right local expert, my best advice is to make sure you have multiple conversations. Just like if you're talking to a lender, if you have the opportunity and your insurance allows you to talk to multiple doctors, make sure you have a couple conversations and see who you're most comfortable with before you make that final decision. And I think the most important thing of finding the right agent is as well making sure that they actually care about the process. They understand deeply exactly what it is that your goal is. Most of the time it involves a sale, but your goal might be purchasing out of area or out of state or moving to a bigger home. I think more so the sales process should be straightforward for someone with a lot of experience, and they should be worried more so about your next steps of where you're going to be, because we don't want to risk the idea of homelessness, especially if it's a sale and a potential purchase in the future. So that's number one. Number two is making sure if we do have the opportunity to make home improvements, that we make the appropriate recommendations. We've worked with clients in the past that absolutely have no reserves to be able to do any work, yet we do know that it benefits them, because how often are you really going to sell a house? Your average resident in our area lives in a home for 20 plus years. And of course, there's going to be, trend changes and wear and tear that's normal to a house that obviously most of what we have to sell is resale. So completing improvements before we even get to that stage, it's making the recommendations, is having the appropriate vendors such as contractors and stagers walk through the home and give you advice on some of the things that we see consumers want. And maybe even Jenny or Ashley, you could chime in on what you see as, you're touring properties, whether it's our own or you're touring properties out there for buyers quite frequently. And what are some changes that you might be seeing, especially during a time of shelter and COVID, and where people are spending more time at home? What are people looking for in the home that they buy?
A lot of people are looking for areas that are have a backyard is important, or some type of outdoor area is ideal, and areas where they can have a home office that's separate from their main living space, so it's a little more quiet. I actually had some people who mentioned they didn't want a fully open concept because then they couldn't really work from home, but people still, I would say most people still like the open concept homes, but as long as there's like an office that is separate that they can work from, away from the main living area. And brighter, a lot of recessed lighting, light floors, and lighting is really key because we're stuck inside all the time.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate your feedback. And I think you mentioned a couple of good points, where space at home, whether it's outdoors in the yard or inside where you could have a home office, is more important than ever. I think you recently posted a quote, actually, Jenny, that I saw. We used to go outdoors for work, for working out, for eating, for certain leisures that we want to enjoy, the luxuries of life. And we're finding in this time, home is where we do all of that. We work at home. Our kids go to school at home. We work out at home. We don't go to gyms anymore. At least there's limitations for that. And we eat more at home than ever before. And that's why, as much as there's uncertainty in the market, the more move-in ready we can present a potential home that is for sale, the more likely we're going to get a better price for it, because it gives the consumer, the buyer, peace of mind that they're going to potentially inherit a house that they do not have to carry an additional lease for during renovations, or they don't have to have extra reserves or the management time that it's going to take to do the changes themselves. So that's more important than ever before. So obviously here, this is one of the examples of a property we recently sold, and it was a trust sale where it was a family home for, you know, over 50 years that the family had owned this. And the family had decided to pour resources into the home to make it move-in ready. We removed the wall between the dining room and the kitchen, and also the living room to make it a little bit open. And we added lighting, we redid the flooring. There was hardwood flooring underneath that carpeting. And it just gives the future owner a completely different feel, and the opportunity to move in right away to enjoy it with their family, especially if they're spending over $1 million in their area to be able to purchase a home. So on the side, the scope of work, you can see some of the things that we did specifically for this one. We refinished the wood flooring, removed wall, interior paint, new recessed lighting and fixtures. Double pane windows are brand new as well. And new electrical, new heating furnace, new ducting, and new water heater. And we staged it, we cleaned it, and it was ready for the new homeowner to obviously move in and inherit. And here's another example also. It's a slightly newer construction attached home where it was built newer, so the updates, you know, someone could move in right away as it is. However, because it's been occupied, as you can see, the carpets were a little bit more soiled. So we changed that to laminate flooring. We repainted it and made it a lot brighter. We added lighting. We redid the kitchen. And it just gives a completely different feeling where we were able to help the seller net, obviously get a higher price and net a better value. And stretch their obviously equity and their investment dollars to make sure that they were able to sell for a higher price to move on to wherever life took them next. Number 3 is pricing a home competitively. There's such a thing as transparent pricing now, if you have not heard. Traditional pricing in the last 9 years of growth in our market, traditional pricing in our area from San Francisco down to San Jose has been pricing it lower, sometimes substantially lower, especially if you're in a city looking for properties, and garnering a lot of showings, foot traffic, and ultimately multiple offers. Well, that's not really as frequent as we see and as commonplace anymore, just because there are limitations on showings in open houses. So nowadays what we see more often is potentially transparent pricing. And as the market continues to improve, we might default back to traditional pricing as well. Transparent pricing is a pricing model where a homeowner may decide to price the property at where they believe they want to potentially sell the home for, and also just making sure that they are upfront about entertaining for showings. So before someone steps foot in the door, they see it online and they have the price in front of them already. And I think more than ever, agents like Jenny and Ashley and ourselves, we're having conversations with potential listing agents, uncovering the seller's motivations and understanding if they priced it as transparent or traditional, and getting an idea of how they came to the pricing strategy that they had obviously listed a property for. So one of the important things is the market also changes week by week right now. So as much as there's going to be a period where you make that determination, you do want to move forward with a potential sale, to the preparation and eventually the hitting of your property on the market. I think in between, it's going to be important for you to work with an agent that's going to keep you up to date on the market, whether that's giving you updates on inventory changes, buyer trend changes, you know, comments and feedback from other nearby listings that we have of what people are looking for. And that's ultimately going to influence whichever pricing adoption we're going to take and move forward with. So it's going to be circumstantial, property by property. It's going to be different. And I think most important is communicating what's going on in the marketplace in a timely manner and fashion, so you know exactly what to expect and what's going on. Next is making sure we present and stage the home to sell for a higher price. You know, I think staging is pretty self-explanatory. We can show you some before and afters if you're interested. We can share with you some of the projects that we've had the opportunity and we've been grateful to work on. And yet the stats right in front of you are going to tell a story. So I'm just going to share them with you. 83% of buyer agents say that staging made a difference, and it was easier for a buyer to visualize a property as their future home because there is already furniture existing there. You know, we're as consumers, we're not conditioned to know exactly how our future living situation is going to be, especially if it's a first-time purchase or if it's a brand new space. Even if it is a second home purchase, it's a brand new space that we might not have furniture for. So if we can help the consumer visualize exactly what it might potentially look like if they live there, even before they made the commitment to buy, it makes an even stronger case for them to justify paying a higher price if they did see the furniture and the accessories as if they were going to live there. Next is 44% of buyer agents say that staging a home increased the dollar value offered. And we can attest to that too. We can agree with that, where we've sold properties that unfortunately were occupied and we didn't have the opportunity to stage, where there were limitations on showings and requesting for an appointment to see a home, versus the complete opposite is if the house is completely vacant, we had the opportunity to work on it. And also, of course, we staged it and it was clean, it was easy access for anyone to tour, especially if a lot of the consumers nowadays work a standard 9 to 5. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to tour homes if it's occupied after hours on the weekends, especially if we occupy and we obviously enjoy a home more than ever. It's not uncommon though that if the default option that we have is to occupy a home that we're obviously potentially selling, we just have to make sure we strategize around when our showing is going to be allowed. Are we going to do a partial stage? So there's going to be other discussion items that will be on the list depending on the circumstance that we're working with. 53% of sellers agents say that staging a home decreases the amount of time a home spends on the market. Now we realize everyone's situation is going to be different. Some people, they want to move right away. Others, they do have some flexibility because until they sell, they cannot buy, for example. So depending on the circumstance, if time was of the essence, staging actually makes a difference in terms of how fast we are able to entertain and receive an offer, so we can negotiate and put it into escrow and give you more definitive next steps sooner. And then last is going to be 95% of agents recommend that sellers declutter their home before putting it on market. And I think if you ever remember, when you search for your home, I'm sure if you could recall, some of the properties you toured were occupied and some of the properties you toured were vacant. And I think it gives you a different sense of the ability of accessibility and also how to visualize the space. And I think more than ever, people are more conscious about their health and their surroundings than ever before because of shelter and because of the COVID-19 virus. Where if they are touring a property that's occupied, they're going to want to make sure that obviously there's county regulations that only one family unit at any given time could even enter the premises of potentially a house for sale. So, but also to protect the health and safety of our sellers, if there is another option for us to be able to sell when it's not occupied, that probably would be better from potentially selling for a higher price, the ease and time frame, but also for your personal health. So those are some of the things that we would want to be aware of and keep in mind. It's not impossible, but then there's going to be a situational basis that we're going to review to make sure that we can make each situation and influence the outcome to be its best. Number 5, I think a lot of people will have questions on how tours are handled, what appropriate measures are going to be in place to make sure that health and safety are top of mind. As much as, of course, we want to make sure that we can accommodate showings, we want to make sure that people are safe and we take every precaution to do so. So I think, as most people may know, most people start their search online nowadays. So more important than ever is making sure that we have all the resources done up front as a listing agent and provided, so that when people search for a home, They can have, for example, not only professional photography that they can browse through, especially if it's staged, they can visualize themselves living in there even before they step foot in the house. Secondly is making sure that we have a walkthrough video of the house. So from the front door, and then of course, flowing through the home, walking through as if you were a consumer to give people a visual and a sense of space, even before they step foot in the house and request for a tour. And of course, third is going to be what you see, a 3D Matterport, where they can visualize from top down, or they can press through on their computer as if they're going room by room, hallway to bathroom to bedrooms to backyard. So they can get, as much of a sense of feeling of space and the house itself before they make the request to tour. And that's why what your agent does to prepare the home visually online is more important than ever, because there are no open houses. There's only private tours. Now, let's say it does get to the stage where we do everything we can to prepare a house so people could have an experience online. They're eventually going to request for a tour for the property. And what they're going to do is they're going to, of course, make sure nowadays your standard procedure to book a specific time to see it, sign off on something called a PEAD form disclosing that they're touring during COVID-19. And us as a listing agent and agency is providing the appropriate personal protection equipment at the front door. Whether they have a mask, of course they do, it's by law that they have to when they're in public, but having gloves, having hand sanitization, having everything that's appropriate, from booties, from everything that they will need, so when they enter the home, whether it's occupied or vacant, that they don't have to, if all the lights are already turned on, if it's an occupied home, they don't have to touch any switches. Maybe it's only the front door. Or if it's a vacant home, that everything's available for them so they can tour with ease. And from a marketing standpoint, there's going to be certain things, whether it's hard copy mail, whether it's promotions that we do, or even as simple as fielding up calls from consumers asking questions about the property. You need to make sure you partner yourself with someone that's going to be very welcoming, encouraging of people to go tour. So marketing listings, we have a whole checklist. If you are curious to see that, we're more than happy to share that with you so you can see more detail of exactly what we do. And as we say, agents are really the gatekeepers of those ready, willing, and motivated buyers. So the most likely person that's going to purchase your property is already working with an agent, and there's going to be certain standards and procedures we follow to reach out to agents that prominently represent buyers and sellers in a respective geographic location. Next is negotiations, and just to quickly talk about it, as your listing agent, as I said earlier, a lot of novice agents will receive one offer or several offers, and they'll recommend for you to take the best offer. On paper, it might look like great terms and a great price, yet how do you know if we're leaving money on the table? And the only way we will know is if we ask the appropriate questions. So as prominent listing agents in the area, we make sure we take every step we can to make sure if we do receive one or several offers, we make sure we have the conversations that are appropriate with a buyer's agent and also with the lender on file. We want to learn about the background of the buyer. We want to know how long the buyer's agent worked with this buyer. And we also want to know if there's any terms that, if they're from out of area, are they familiar with the standards of what typically goes into a contract for our area. And we'll easily pick up on things if they are out of the ordinary, and we will make sure we capitalize it for you on your behalf as a seller. We want to make sure that if there's hiccups with the offer, we clarify it up front if it's the only one we have the opportunity to work with, or if there are hiccups up front, we already know that might be, an indication of how escrow is going to be. So part of negotiations, we reach out to the appropriate buyer agent and lender to find out more about their file, to make sure that whatever they put on paper is not just a facade. We want to make sure that their file is clean with the lender. And we're going to ask some tough questions to make sure that they are familiar with their buyer and figure out if the buyer has room, and make sure we negotiate for a better price and faster terms. And last, number 7 is escrow and closing, which we have a team in place to make sure that once we do accept an offer in the state of California, we're waiting for the buyer to perform. So we can plan ahead for our next steps, but the worst feeling ever is if the buyer decides to back out, and yet your agent ourselves should have been able to pick up on little things that might have indicated there would be a surprise down the road. So making sure that happens, it's a combination of what we do to negotiate on your behalf, is to very clearly share with you exactly the terms of the contract that might affect the outcome of closing. And once we are in contract, we share that information with our client care manager, who's Amy, and the person that's helping us with our documentation to make sure that everything's lined up, T's are crossed, I's are dotted, is Kathy. And they're going to be a very high touch team to make sure that you are aware every step of the day, hopefully every day or every other day, on what's going on with the buyer's file. Whether the lender on the buyer's end is hitting hurdles or having new conditions to satisfy, you should be the first person to know. Because the last thing we want is if contingency for the loan is due today, we tell you the same day that they want an extension, or the worst, they decide to back out and we had no indication given to you. That's what we call an incompetent agent who maybe is too busy. And that's why we do have a team structure to make sure that there's specialized people checking in on the file. Just like if you were to have a medical procedure, there's always a nurse on standby 24/7 if you were obviously at the hospital, to make sure that we check the pulse, to make sure that medication is provided, to make sure that you're recovering at the rate that we come to have an expectation for, and that you could be discharged at obviously the optimal time. So same thing, we treat every single transaction with a lot of care because we want to make sure that your next steps, selling is part of the process, but making sure that there's no hiccups for next steps of where you're going next. So those are the 7 steps. And I know we quickly ran through them. I'm gonna go to the first slide since it has all of them. And I guess, do we have any questions? Do we have any common questions that people have that we could answer?
Yeah, I think Jessica had a question. She was just wondering if now is a good time to sell and if home values have actually gone down, and like whether she should sell now or potentially wait.
That's a great question. I think as much as there's going to be a seasonality in the market, there's going to be real estate cycles. There's going to be obviously COVID-19 that's affecting obviously, you know, human habits and behavior. And ultimately it's going to come down to your personal needs. So for example, if we could pick the highest time to sell where we do anticipate that's going to be where we can sell for the highest price, obviously we would. Yet, if we had no need to move or to sell, we wouldn't do it. So I think when you are exploring the idea to sell, it is important to understand what's going on in the market, whether it's better or worse. But more so, it's usually a personal reason from the encounters that we have with obviously each respective seller, whether they're moving closer to family, whether they're moving out of state because it's cost of living is less expensive. Everyone's goals are going to be different. Some of the first questions we typically ask, by the way, for Jessica is, can you keep this house as a rental? I mean, do you really have to sell? Because long-term wealth, and our mission is to help families build wealth through real estate. Long-term wealth is built, especially in real estate, by holding on to it. If you are selling just for the sake of cashing out, but you're going to pay a lot in capital gains in taxation, maybe it doesn't make sense. If you don't have monthly payments for your mortgage and you can definitely have a cash flow positive property and there's no need for you to obviously have liquid cash, maybe it doesn't make sense. But if it is where you have to purchase your next home and the only way you could purchase is to take the reserves from your current home, then of course we'll make the appropriate recommendations and see if it is that that's the choice and the top thing that you do feel like you need to act on for your next move, then we're going to advise as best we can in terms of the improvement and the marketing process. In terms of the current time, just to give everyone a market update, at a high level, we are seeing healthy movement in housing where people are really appreciating the fact and moving towards more suburban areas from urban areas such as San Francisco, because they appreciate having more space, because as we said earlier, more people appreciate and are doing so much more at home. So it's a good time to sell if it makes sense personally for you. And as I said, week by week, the market is changing. So if you do have any specific questions about your area, your neighborhood, or the general anticipation of where the market is going, please feel free to reach out to myself or any of our agents. Hopefully that answers Jessica's question.
Yeah.
I think another common question that, yep, Elizabeth?
Oh no, I was just saying that that was very helpful, and then I think that did help answer her question. Did Jessica have another question? Sorry, no, she didn't.
Yeah, I think some of the questions that other people might have is, there are no open houses at this time, and there's only private tours. So how do I tour homes without open houses? Nowadays, it definitely does require an agent to accompany a tour and to schedule and to make sure that we sign off on appropriate documentation. We talked about transparent pricing. We talked about, can I sell a home during shelter in place and occupying it? During the first month of shelter in place, we were not able to sell homes and help families if they were occupying a property. However, that has changed, and we are, as long as obviously the seller's tolerance allows for it. Have home values gone down? I just checked the stats this morning, and overall home values have not gone down. And there is a difference in trend. When I pulled stats for single family homes, we see a gradual increase, as in any appreciating year that we've had in the last 9 years. Yet there's a little bit more inconsistency when it comes to condos and townhomes, because condos and townhomes tend to be a little more dense per square mile of having people. So I think people are more aware than ever of whether they want to be in proximity of more people, or if they have the opportunity to purchase a single family home, they rather be able to do that. Should I wait until the market crashes? Of course, we get a lot of this question from a lot of sellers and buyers out there. I think holding on to real estate long-term is never a bad idea. Just like, you know, the only wrong time to sell a stock is obviously when it goes all the way down, you decide to sell it, because we've all seen the stock market, just like as well the real estate market, which is very steady and has shown, you know, 3 to 4% returns over the history of values, is that if you hold on to an asset long term, you tend to do well, unless you're forced to sell during a time where maybe you can't make the payments, or you know, life takes you in a different direction and you have no other choice to sell during that time. So another common question is, have rents fallen? And there definitely are more vacancies than ever, especially in urban areas like San Francisco. And because there's more vacancies, that means there's more inventory for people to potentially rent out. And yes, that has influenced rental values. Do we have any other questions?
Great. I think you just actually touched upon it, Wilson. Jessica's next question was if rents have fallen, and you just covered that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know some of the people that will be watching this are not going to be watching it live. So if you do have any specific questions, whether you watch this a week or a month or sometime after, feel free to reach out to us and we can share with you some of the projects that we're working on and some of the market updates at that appropriate time. But I really hope, you know, this was helpful. It gave everyone a quick overview of, you know, the steps that it would take. There's obviously a lot more detail that we could potentially cover. And at least as, you know, an introduction to what it takes to sell, hopefully this gave you a really clear overview. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Wilson.
Okay, have a good day, everyone.